My husband's money. It just disappeared. We didn't know where it was going, and he was trying to play it off. That is until I discovered exactly where the money's going. It's been going to a girl, but not just some random girl, not a work colleague of his or anything like that. Oh no, it's going to my sister. Hey guys, I hope that you're doing well. I don't know how to begin these writings. I guess I'll start with the initial problem and introduce everyone. My name's Sarah, 36. I live with my husband Tom, a successful lawyer with whom I've been married to for 12 years. I don't have much to complain about in life, really. I have a good job as a member of the human resources team at a state-owned company. But I've noticed some strange things regarding one of my closest family members. My sister, Emily. Emily and I have had a good relationship over the years, better than most sisters, I'd say. Whenever one had a problem, the other was just the first to know about it. So we could work together just to find the solution. However, that doesn't mean that everyone can have their own life, and I'm afraid that in her case, her life is going into a dark corner. I say this because for some time now, I've noticed some changes in her. Or, well, for some years, she had a somewhat different attitude than usual, I'd say. A little less worried and haughty, as if she knows things that I don't know, and she takes advantage of that. But this is just a guess. I started writing this just a few years ago when she started to tend to receive, quote, gifts from these unknown sources. I mean, when we see each other, she always goes around in luxurious and showy clothes. The other day, I saw her with a very vintage pearl necklace, which I had been dreaming about for, well, you could say decades, since I saw an old movie that used one similar. I spent entire birthdays waiting to receive it as a gift. Everybody knew I wanted it, and seeing Emily with the necklace, well, I admit it did not sit well with me. I'm afraid of sounding a bit selfish and even envious, but that's where these spaces were created for, right? To vent and just share concerns and insecurities. Well, guys, that's mine. My sister is simply having too many luxuries while we're in a not-so-good position. I said that my husband's a successful lawyer, remember? But that's just the big name because financially we haven't been doing well. We've run up debt, and we've gotten to the point where we've had to get rid of a lot of our savings just to stay afloat. Seeing Emily just wear these cute clothes, it makes me feel bad, and the worst and the funniest part is that I don't even know where they come from. I know it's not from work because she works in a simple department store. At the risk of sounding demeaning, which is not my goal, and although I've asked her as my thing for a while now if there is a boyfriend or at least a secret suitor, she denies the subject or even prefers to avoid it outright. I'm telling you, I don't understand why she was the first to find out about my romance with Tom when I was starting to date guys. I have a small idea, but it'd be bold for me to assume such a thing. Is that as she has a partner with quite a bit of wealth? You would say a suitor who doesn't want anyone to find out what they have, as his work is quite discreet. In such a case, it seems strange to me that she spends her time with so much jewelry and accessories, something not very discreet on her part. I don't know. This whole situation's caused apathy on my side. Due to something so delicate that's been going on for a couple years now, Tom and I have discussed it, but the subject of having a child has always been on the table for several years. At one time, we thought I was pregnant, but it was a false alarm. And well, thank goodness, since we understand that we were not prepared for that burden at the time. Today, however, the opposite is the case. Or, well, at least that's what I thought it was. I mean, I'm getting older, and he's getting older. If we don't hurry with it, we'll run out of time. This is because of a comment Emily made just a few days ago, where she mentioned her intention to spoil one of her friend's babies and even gave her a very nice stroller with spring decorations. Where does she get so much money? I don't know what hurts me more, the fact that she's enjoying life more while we have less and less. Or the fact that she won't tell me where her successes come from. It makes me feel left out and even betrayed. I hope the situation will improve in the next few days. What's up, everybody? Mr. Reddito here. Okay, so the comment section on part 1 is going insane. A lot of people are saying OP is a spoiled brat, and nobody owes you anything. But there are quite a few comments taking up for OP. I want to tell you there is multiple updates. If you're new to the channel, hello, my name's Mr. Reddito. I animate and narrate stories every single day. So make sure you subscribe for daily videos, and let's hop into update number 1 and see what's going on. I just found out something that left me chilled and nauseous to the point of vomiting almost. Even though it's not something on the life or death line, I learned the supposed luxuries my sister Emily has are being, well, given by my husband. I found out after going through some papers Tom had in his home office. Papers scattered all over the place, which I even tried to help by arranging them. They were statements from the bank, reflecting on a lot of fat numbers that I barely understood, to be honest. I've never liked to get involved with his finances, as I know we both need our privacy. But I swear it was just a sidelong glance when I found Emily, her name, on one of the documents. Pay stubs, which dated back a long time. More or less from the time I told them that Emily started to change her daily dynamics. At first, I was surprised and tried not to think much about it, but when I brought it up in the evening time, just casually, simply, a mere comment, he said to me as avoidantly as possible, and I quote you, "And did you, see some of the papers?" No, I was minding my own business." Well, when I said that, he seemed to sigh in relief. He thinks I didn't notice, but I did, and that's when my alarms went off. Boom, red flag. The thoughts that we're running out of money precisely so that my sister could afford all the luxuries in the world seemed unusual to me, and that's when 1,000 TV show thoughts came into my mind, along the lines of, my husband will bankrupt us, just to please my young sister. Because, well, right. Why? Why would he be cheating on me behind my back? Would Emily be conniving at something? Whatever the scenario, it was a tough thing to digest. And I didn't want to get too many ideas because I was slowly deteriorating mentally from so many thoughts. There was a meeting with our friends last weekend, and it was then that one of them, whom I thanked internally as I never told her to say it in the first place, commented on Emily's new earrings. Immediately showed them to everybody. They're gold snakes with little pearls in the eyes, which gave her a refined look. She just said that they were a gift, and I swear that for half a second she looked at me in the eye with vanity grimace, as if she was telling me, look, I'm better than you. Well, I felt that. No one bought the story. We all knew that she had a suitor, but only I knew what it could be about. When I got home, I told Tom about this, and he wasn't kind to Emily at all. Your sister is always spending her time and money on ridiculous things. You should talk to her about using the money they gave her to use her more effectively, for heaven's sake." Well, there's another red flag, because he was assuming she was receiving the money from an outside source instead of earning it on her own. Although it wasn't a hard thing to deduce. Let's see. I know my husband, despite all this, and when he said he felt what Emily does is reckless and immature, it's because he seriously believes it is. I had to leave the scene so as not to lose my composure, as I felt like the lights were going out of me, and that at any single moment in time I could pass out. I spent a long time in the bathroom pondering whether or not to tell Tom about the discovery that, I just made. But I told myself that I had better look for more evidence of it. So, like a James Bond movie, I went looking for evidence. I took a day off work, where I pretended to be sick, so I could walk around town a little less busy. I walked to Tom's office, waiting outside his building, but it was hours before I even noticed a small change. Then I watched as he walked out. Perhaps because of lunch issues. Strange thing, though, because he always takes his lunch from home. Lunch that I make him. He walked away, so I had to be careful he did not spot me, and I tried to look as natural as possible. He made it as far as none other than the building where guess who works. Yep, Emily. He went all the way to the department store, and that's when I had to pause my search, because the employees there know me, and the last thing I wanted was for some reckless person to arrive with gossip. I watched as the two of them interacted with each other from a distance. She seemed very happy, but his back was turned, so I could not quite determine what they were saying. Then they moved on to a different room, losing sight of them, and when I looked back at Tom, he looked a bit worried with a face that was hard to describe. I waited for a few more minutes and saw Emily coming out of the store somewhat contently, talking to one of the co-workers. She seemed to be making superior mannerisms, with a goofy grin on her face at every single turn, as if she had triumphed in a game of Monopoly. That gave me a little bit of annoyance. But no more than I have towards Tom, I'll add that. I'm considering confronting him about everything, because when I saw him on his way home from work, I noticed how he looked everywhere, as if he didn't want to be seen by anybody. My thoughts are in an absolute whirlwind. It's super effective. Thinking about my husband having an affair with my sister. That's why I'm walking around a bit upset about the whole thing, as I always thought these things were just happening to others, but not to you. I'm rehearsing my speech in my head, how I'll get through to Tom telling him that I know what he's having with Emily, and leave this as a statement in case something bad happens. What's up, guys? Oh boy, so update number 1 took us on a wild ride. The thing is, though, update number 2 is about to tell us so more we did not know about the sister and husband situation. Drop a comment down right now what you would do if you were in OP's position. It's a tough one to be in, but update number 2 is about to get a lot tougher. Here we go. Hey again. I hope everyone's doing well. I came to tell you that I was able to learn a little more about my sister and husband situation. I admit that I'm a little relieved, but only in some ways. I would say in the worst way possible. No, indeed, Tom was not having an affair with Emily. Oh, the contrary, but they were together for some pretty strong reasons. I've spent the last few days pondering and mulling over how I might write all this out, and I made a list of ideas that I'll try to reflect on as best that I can. To understand the context of what I'm about to tell you, and trusting that you don't know this information because you're not a local and you're a complete internet stranger, you have to know that years ago an accident happened in our city. A car crash, that to this day is still or was still on the heads of many. It was only a few years ago, but involved the horrific death of at least 13 people on the road. The story goes more or less like this. I try to use many of the journalistic notes that the media used back then, and those that have come out since. At nighttime, there was kind of a traffic jam on one of the highways in the city. I don't remember well why it was originally like that. I only know that it lasted at least an hour for cars to move at least just a kilometer. Maybe because it was raining and the roads get congested when that happens. Everybody was on edge. But that's the only understandable part of it. A driver started to, move forward on one of them dirt roads, being something quite daring and dangerous. Later, the whereabouts of this person were found and he had to pay several fines. Anyways, the thing is that after this, some decided to imitate the shortcut, going along the dirt roads regardless of the vehicles or obstacles around. The problem started with one of the cars behind tried to sneak in with a reckless start. An unidentified driver overtook some rows of vehicles and went to the dirt road, obstructing the passage of several. Now, the issue is that when he reached the beginning of the roadblock, he tried to force his way in, causing several drivers behind to back up. The problem was that one of the drivers who braked abruptly was an elderly lady, who, upon seeing such recklessness, made a mistake. Instead of smashing the brake, she hit the accelerator, in turn scaring the anonymous driver, who panicked himself and dodged, only to then accelerate and crash into her, pushing her completely off the road. She, in turn, pushed the others, causing a massive collision on the dirt road, the largest anyone in the city has ever seen. What's more, that lady hit 3 other cars, having damaged the accelerator, so she just kept on barreling, rolling down, even when the lady was unconscious. Well, a passerby tried to approach to help, but saw that the lady was unresponsive. When the car broke away from the row she had pushed, it shot out to the front, running over one of the guys who went alone to help. The rest of the drivers in the back were also affected. In fact, it was quite horrible, because the engine of one of the cars actually exploded, catching fire to the vehicle instantly, and ending the lives of a man and his mother. Among those affected was also the old lady at the beginning who, lost her life due to a full-minute heart attack because of the shock. The curious thing is, though, that there was no injuries, only death. And the case is called, and I quote, the 13 on 16th Street, or 16's 13, as they later decided to call the accident. The whole thing was labeled a hit and run, and until now, the whereabouts of the reckless driver who initiated the massive collision, as I say, the first one who went down the dirt road, was reprimanded. It remained a mystery because he left the scene of the crime very quickly, aside from the fact that it was raining and nobody was able to identify the driver. The only clue was the model of the car that, it was a young driver. This information was known because of one of the deceased told it to one of the people who were helping them, and this person remembered this information saying something like, "The young man just accelerated," and that was all. For years, this was the only clue, and it was quite bitter news for the people of the city, implying a change in the road systems of the area. Lots of investigations was done, and it was trending on networks for the first few years, but nothing seemed to be brought up, and everyone thought it would remain unsolved. It's really hard for me to give you to understand how this event has been in everyone's conversations for so long, as it has become quite a recurring topic in the daily lives here. Currently, there is even a memorial to the victims near the crash site, and to this day, the whereabouts of the perpetrator is still being sought. Well, I should say until now. And yes, it turns out that Tom, old Tommy boy, is that reckless driver who caused the affair. I found out in the most unpleasant way possible by the extortions that my sister was doing to him. It turns out that I had been following the two of them for a few days, and I was able to find 1 or 2 useful things, like that one day after every time they saw each other, Emily would end up with a fancy piece of clothing to fill out the closet. I plucked up the courage to confront Tom about the situation and just decided to start talking about it. It was on a Saturday when we were resting in bed that I decided to ask him, and, I said to him, "Tommy, excuse me, I'd like to talk to you about something serious. For some time now, I've noticed certain attitudes of yours that don't correspond to the usual, but it also involves someone else. My sister." Immediately, Tom's face changed, giving me a defeated expression, and in the matter of no time, he was in absolute tears. I was unmoved by that, but I admit I was shocked when he said, "I'm sorry about this, Sarah. I'm sorry. I've kept this all from you, but it's not what you think." I swear for a second I thought about leaving the room so I would not have to endure the raw truth, not knowing it was about something else. He said to me already with red eyes and a bed full of tears, something that almost stopped my heart. I can finally talk to somebody about this. I didn't understand anything. He told me what happened that day. Well, and I quote, "Years ago, a tragedy occurred. The 13th on 16th, right? Remember? Well, I was the one who caused it. Please don't be alarmed by that. I know how horrible it was, and that it all entailed very gruesome details. I was in a rush that day for a law school evaluation, an evaluation that if I missed, I would not have graduated with top honors. I tried to drive fast as I could, being reckless in my driving, and the impacts were terrible. They didn't even manage to see me, so I was able to escape without realizing all the damage I've even done. I went straight home, took a bus back, and I had to get rid of the car on the way back, and I took it to the acquaintance's junkyard just to scrap it. I lost a lot of money by scrapping it, but I thought I got away with it. Sarah, I was terrified for weeks. Hearing how terrible the whole event was, I hadn't realized the damage I caused. And I was only interested in getting away with it, Sarah. Worst of all, in a posthumous analysis, I realized that even if I had missed the evaluation that day, I still would have graduated, no prob. But I was young, ambitious, Sarah, and I spent all these years in fear of getting caught. That's why I decided to do something. Almost every year, on the eve of the anniversary of the fateful day, I make small anonymous donations to the family of the victims, just trying to make up a little for the damage I caused. I know it's not much and it won't change things, but I try to make up for my mistakes, Sarah. That's why at the time of the year, we have been going through some not-so-easy economic situations, but I've been able to cope with it. You'd be surprised to know that my final salary would not be enough for much more, but it is a burden that I decide to carry with me. I tried to go to a psychologist, but really, the panic of telling anyone else about this has just been a huge burden on me for years. Seeing my wife to my face, just knowing that I have a personal stain on my record, is something I don't wish upon my worst. I'm trying to punctuate all the things he said to me, as his speech was quite lengthy before I could even begin to speak. And then he starts to touch on Emily. That's when your sister comes in. I used to love her very much. I mean, she's my sister-in-law, my family, for goodness sake. But she found out about it when I was making payments one day, and she went on my computer just because she was going to send an email. And she just noticed the list of names to pay on the tab next to it. It was very nosy of her, and to this day I don't forgive her for it. But that was the day everything changed for me, because now somebody knew my secret. He told me about Emily confronting and telling him that something strange was going on. He gave assumptions until the truth came out, and she pushed him so hard that he ended up confessing everything. The same way he did to me, but with worse results. This was because Emily, the same little sister who had been with me since childhood, decided to keep her silence, quote, at bay, if Tom would do her just a few tiny favors. At first, she demanded money. Although Tom said he offered it to her first and then she took advantage of the offer, well, she made a mistake in originally proposing it, but as the treat progressed, she asked for fancy clothes. At first I asked why, and then he told me that apparently the fact that, quote, someone else buying things for her made her feel special. In a twisted way, this was a mental shock to me, as I was trying to coordinate a lot of ideas in my head. I went from assuming infidelity on the part of my husband and sister to blackmail, which had apparently gone on for years. Tom tells me that in pleasing Emily, he had to stop paying the victims all the money. Couldn't give them anything. Something that hurt him too much, and even more so when the reason for his silence was only concerning with the useless articles of clothing. He told me that was why he was so aggressive some time ago, because of Emily's expenses. In truth, he was upset. because she didn't use his money on anything useful, only spoiled child necessities. Every month he had to go like a sad dog to give Emily something so that she would keep his secret from the public, for he knew that it was, ever revealed, not only his career but his whole life could end bitterly. To some extent he was grateful to be able to talk to me about it, as he thought that his life was becoming an endless cycle of abuse being manipulated by my sister, at least until I came along. I asked him what he planned to do, and he asked for my advice. It made me a little angry and upset to think that all the time he was living in fear that the truth would come out, but to not tell even his wife. I told him I would talk to Emily later to set the record straight, and here I am writing all this down. I don't know what will happen in this conversation, but I can assure you it will be intense. Update number 3. I write this in tears. Of happiness, of joy, of sadness, of anger, but ultimately tears of peace. I had the conversation with Emily and Tom, who at first was uncomfortable because he felt like he was going to be scolded. And I told them that I already knew about everything that was going on. Emily's first reaction was, "You told her?" reprimanding Tom, but I told her that I had figured it all out and that I was very disappointed in both of them. I asked Emily for explanations, telling her that our parents raised us better than that, than to end up being a blackmailer. She got defensive, saying that I had no right to criticize anything, as my life had always been, quote, too perfect for anybody. And that's when Emily confessed everything. And when I say everything, yeah, it's everything. She began to raise her voice, saying about how good my life had been up until then, and how she had always been envious of me for everything that happened. Seeing me with a husband, a dream house, a stable job, and to have a child. Something we talked about since we were kids. She kept criticizing me and insulting my lifestyle, and all I did was strive to have what I wanted. Maybe with my husband's help, as a common thing to have, right? Well, I told them now the dynamic that they were carrying was going to change because, I recommended them to confess everything that they've done. They both responded in unison, and I quote, "No," setting off their bails, and Tom said, "Are you crazy? We would ruin our lives and everything we've ever accomplished so far would just fall apart, including our marriage." And that's when Emily followed, "No way I'm going to ruin this. In that case, I'd even say that you kept the secret longer than I did, or that I just found out." I swear she said that. And that's when Tom fell on the floor crying and swearing at Emily. "Damn you! You couldn't just buy food or something, could you? No, it had to be clothes, jewelry, the stupidest stuff in the world." Wow. It was then that a pretty strong argument started between the two of them, insulting each other and saying things I never thought possible. At one point, Emily even went so far as to say that there was a time when she was jealous of my marriage, and that she would have liked to sleep with Tom, only to say that it was a good thing she didn't because she considered him unmanly. He, for his part, kept insulting her and telling her that she was a freaking blackmailer and a spoiled little child, and that if there was one good thing about confessing his crime, it was that he would drag her down with him so that he could at least make her pay for the most miserable year of his life. I stood in the corner as if I were just sitting a piece of furniture, listening, analyzing to every word, watching as they sometimes noticed my presence. I would look around, and it felt like every decoration, every picture on the wall was carved with lies. And the tears started to flow on their own. I knew I had to stop everything before tragedy started. At one point, I had to interrupt, telling them that they would not have to go through with any of it, as I was going straight to the police about what exactly happened. Well, they rushed at me, blocking the door and looking desperate about it. Absolutely. even saying that nobody would believe me and they would go to great lengths to keep it all hidden. Yeah, they are telling me all this. I felt like I was in a movie when I told them, and I quote, "No need. No need to leave the room. The police are already at the door." Well, I had called them before the conversation had even started, so the outcome, no matter which way it went, would still be the same. And yes, indeed, it was. At that point, they were knocking on the door, and the police only said a couple of sentences before taking Tom away in handcuffs, in a scene that to this day still haunts me in my dreams. Seeing my husband, my lifelong loved one, leaving the front door of the house for the first time, not knowing if I'd ever see him next, well, right next to me again, it was a feeling that was certainly hard to describe, and it was one that I wish nobody had to discover. Of course, Emily and I had to go to the police station where the interrogation began. To tell you the end of it all, what I heard feared so much happened, and it was an unprecedented media uproar in our city. The person responsible for the greatest automobile tragedy in public memory had been found, and people were demanding absolute punishment. I feel like I betrayed my own family, but I thought about it a lot, and simply I could not come up with, well, a scenario where I didn't feel bad for allowing everything that they were doing to happen. My biggest consolation of all was, well, ironically, Emily. She, in her last moment, showed me the baseness of her soul, and even though she was my sister, I felt enormous satisfaction when I heard the verdict of guilty for extortion and withholding information. Well, for a case whose docket hadn't yet closed, I heard it would close in a couple of years, so I was in time for all of this. She screamed, stomped, cried, even threatened me, saying at every turn that it was unfair, and although, yes, it gave me grief, I had to remind myself that she would still be doing her trickery if I had not caught her red-handed. Currently, my life's taken a pretty sharp turn after losing my husband and sister, but if there's one thing I can't forgive, it's betrayal. Or blackmail. In the end, those people will get what they deserve. As happening now it's just me versus the entire world. Although the jewelry that Emily had, having been bought by my husband, in theory becomes my property. So I'll be able to support myself a little with it financially upon selling it. Now I ask you this. How much do you think the jewelry and clothes from 2 years of blackmailing are worth? I think this new stage of my life may start off with the right foot. To me, this story was pretty sad and devastating. I mean, blackmailing is one thing, but we're talking about a town disaster that killed 13 people in an accident, and apparently, according to the comments, this was a rather small town, so something like that definitely affected a lot of lives there. And this girl was blackmailing just to keep it a secret who basically caused it, from the chain reaction to the car wrecks by going ahead and going to the dirt road. I would like to hear from you guys. Do you think that Tom was truly responsible for the accident, or do you think, hey, those people didn't have to follow him? If Tom jumped off a bridge, you don't have to go with him. Or do you think that he basically gave them the idea to go that way and it did cause the wreck? Regardless, I would like to also know, who's worse, Tom or the dirty blackmailer? Go ahead and drop your comment, guys. My name's Mr. Reddito. I record stories every single day, animate and narrate. If that's something you're into, consider subscribing for daily videos. I'll see you guys in the next one tomorrow. Have a fantastic day.